Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the I&I podcast. My name is Dan Aspel, and this episode's guest is Sir David Spiegelhalter. David's is a name you may well be familiar with, as he's been very busy over the past 6 months, and indeed for many decades before that. From October 2016, he's been chair of the Winton Centre for Risk and Evidence Communication. Previously, he was the Winton Professor for the Public Understanding of Risk in the Stats Lab at the University of Cambridge. He is a statistician, he's an author. His most recent book, The Art of Statistics, was released in 2019, and he's currently the host of the podcast Risky Talk. We hope you very much enjoy the episode. So, David, it's a real pleasure to have you here, and thank you very much for joining me.
Well, thanks for asking me.
Particularly as you've been so very busy over the past few months, and you have a lot going on in terms of your own output podcast. So, Risky Talk, I think, has been going for a number of episodes now. How have you enjoyed doing the podcast?
Oh, it's been fascinating. It's Ilan Goodman who's been, producing and directing them and putting them, editing them, and I really enjoyed it. Partly because it's quite nice to be the interviewer rather than the interviewee. And also because I get to talk to some very skilled people. I should explain that the podcast, if you people haven't heard them, Risky Talk, and it's about communicating risk, and so. Although we try to not to make it look too contrived, in fact, over each episode, for each area that we deal with, we try to go through, a fairly sort of structured analysis of what's going on in terms of, what are you trying to communicate? Who are the audiences? How do you engage with those audiences? How do you particularly do you communicate risk and uncertainty, scientific uncertainty? How do you evaluate your messages? What do you think the impact is, and so on? So we try to look at that whole communication process, and of course we've been dealing with pandemics, but we've been dealing with disasters, which is cool, and but also genetic risk and individual health risks and so on. And so it's been. And we're working through one topic after another. And in a way, our aim is something which is related to our Winton Centre, which is to point out the similarities of the challenges facing people across a huge range of areas when they are genuinely trying to communicate to audiences, different audiences, about risk and uncertainty and evidence. I suppose our running theme to all of this is to explore whether people are trying to inform the audience so they might make better decisions, or persuade them to do something. And that's very black and white, and often people are sort of slightly in between. But I absolutely think this is a crucial issue that everyone in communication must honestly look themselves in the mirror and say, are we trying to inform people? Or are we trying to persuade them to do something? And the only way we have to know whether we're trying to test this essentially is that we shouldn't mind what people end up doing. We should be, just open to what people do, as long as we feel that they're making that decision on the basis of good information, and they're doing it appropriately. It fits congruent with their values, and that's quite a big ask, in fact, because most of the time when you drill down into people, they start by saying, "Oh yes, we want to just tell people how it is," and then you find out actually no, they want to persuade people of something.
Oh, that's fabulous. Yeah, I very much look forward to listening to more of Risky Talk. How many episodes are you up to now?
Oh, I can't remember how many. I should have checked. I think we've done about 6 or something.
Fabulous.
Kicking off one subject after another.
And plenty left. So that's fab, and that's run as part of your role at the Winton Centre, as you said just then. And you've introduced a lot of the topics that I wanted to touch on briefly with you today. And again, thank you for taking time out from that podcast to join us on ours. So I was going to ask you firstly about your history with I&I, brief or extensive as that may be. Obviously, you've got the Risky Talk going on, and then last year you released a book, The Art of Statistics, so we can touch on that a little bit as well. But primarily, I wanted to talk to you about your past 6 months, because it's been a very strange period for everybody. But for you, it seems to me from the outside, having heard you a lot on, for example, Radio 4's More or Less, having seen you mentioned across print media and across the BBC and other media outlets. It must have been a very interesting period for you, particularly as, from my experience, your focus in the time I've been working at Cambridge University has been on the relationship between science and the media, and that's something which must have been particularly acute, I would think, over the past 6 months. So that's a big ball of what I wanted to talk to you about in the next half an hour. But let's start about your history with I&I, because I was having a look through our database, and there's a number of programs you've been involved with over the past 15 plus years. Tell me about your experience.
Oh, no, longer ago than that. I mean, it was 1997, I think. Oh, no, I mean, I was involved in some programs right from the beginning, but 1997 was the big one, and was incredibly influential on my whole career. It was a program which is, still very relevant. It was on graphical modeling. So it was putting together essentially statisticians and people working in AI and machine learning and image recognition and all those areas, which were, are cool now, but they were cool 25 years ago as well. This didn't start last year, this stuff. And it was at a time when there was a recognition within machine learning that statisticians and their viewpoints really had a lot to offer. And so it was a wonderful opportunity that the sort of thing I&I is so good at, to have put together different communities and for them to react to each other and stimulate each other, and that's exactly what happened. Anyway, although I live in Cambridge, I had an office and I had a sort of sabbatical there, and I used to walk down there, 2 or 3 days a week and spend my day in the office. And during that time, I took on a piece of work that I really had been meaning to do for some time, which is to look at a bit more technical, a Bayesian method for selecting between models when they've been fitted using Markov-Chain Monte Carlo MCMC methods, and standard measures of Kayak information criteria or chi-squared tests and things just don't hold in those situations when you've got complex hierarchical models with an unspecified number of parameters essentially. And so we developed, I developed, and then with colleagues as a group entity, really, we developed this thing called deviance information criterion and effective degrees of freedom and all that sort of stuff, and ended up, but most of the work I did do at the Isaac Newton, and then ended up being this big paper in the RSS Series B, which was the most highest paper cited. Anyway, it's topped lots of citation things. I don't know how many 10,000 citations it's had or something like that. So it's become it was a really big citation.
A monolith of the science.
It's had a big influence, and I think it's pretty cool. And that was because of the I&I program.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you very much for saying it in exactly those terms. I'll make sure to type it up and put it front page of the website. It's always inspiring to hear that people have had such positive experiences at the Institute. It makes me very proud to be part of it. And
it's extraordinary.
And yes, of course, as you say, that was at the end of the 90s, but you've been a regular visitor since.
I've been in on other things, given seminars, parts of programs and things like that. Never had the time to fully commit myself, and also partly because since 2007 I've been working on communication rather than statistical research. So I essentially changed my career in 2007.
Yeah, and so let's move on to talking about the past 6 months then, because as I say, just from my point of view, mainly because you've popped up on one of my favourite programmes. I know you're regularly on more or less, but you've been certainly during the summer. I think you were on almost every episode.
Not quite.
You've become much more of a household name. Is that fair to say? Over the past 6 months?
And I have, in a sense, have become more well known. I just on my Twitter following has gone up from 15,000 to 65,000, for example. So that's the sort of image of what's happened. And I guess I felt, I'm retired. I'm not paid for any of this at all. So this is all, my unpaid labour. But I did feel that as a statistician who's committed to communication, and I've been banging on about it for years, come this period when it seems very important, I've got to step up to the mark. I mean, I do enjoy it as well, and I want to do it. But I also feel there is a bit of a duty, and it's not just me at all. Loads of people have stepped up. But also given the fact there's so many people, good scientists, who are fairly muted. You know, the modelers and things. There's a lot of people doing some fantastic work who don't engage with the media, and I don't blame them in a way when you hear how unpleasant a lot of the responses are. A lot of nastiness around. So I think that, I can understand that not everyone wants to do this. It doesn't want to find the time, partly because they've got real work to do, as I haven't got any real work to do. I can do this. So I can really understand people's reluctance to do it, but I think actually it's good that some people do it, and I'm one of them.
Yeah, I'm very interested because as a scientist, you are a dealer, so to speak, in objective information, and
well, yeah,
that's what you're used to in your profession.
That is what I'm trying to do. It's like this business. It goes back to what I was saying about our podcast, this inform and not persuade. I genuinely, well, I got to admit, let's put my cards on the table now. I don't know what we should do, you know, as policy. I don't know. People ask me, so I don't know. It's not my job to recommend things. And I wouldn't, even if it was, I wouldn't know what to recommend. I'm genuinely uncertain as to the best course of action. I'm genuinely uncertain about some of the underlying science. For example, you know, the big unknown is, you know, what is the degree perhaps of some natural immunity in the population? Highly disputed, highly relevant to policies and things like that. I don't know. Yeah, and so, but there are, of course, you know, very extreme views that people are taking up. I mean, I ignoring the complete conspiracy theorists, but even, you know, there's a strong, what you might call lockdown skeptic point of view, and some of it is over the top, but some of it, actually, many of whom write to me a lot, are very reasonable, and they point out data and they say, well, this looks like there's a lot more immunity in the population than you might think, and lots of stuff like that. And then there's what you might call, you know, the zero COVID view, which is we should be really, you know, not lockdown. I mean, that's a terrible word, but we should be having, you know, stringent measures as possible, and so on. And I'm sort of in the middle, and I guess all my concern is to try to improve the discussion that's happening, so to clarify the stats. So I end up getting used by both sides in a way. And the classic one was in May, when I was quoted by Boris Johnson in Parliament one week, and then quoted by Keir Starmer the following week, both approvingly. And I thought, well, you know, maybe this is a demonstration of balance in some way.
Yeah.
But it's revealed the problem. At that point, I decided to lower my profile a bit. Because you may think I've had quite a big profile, but it's nothing to what I could have had. The demand is bottomless for media presentation. And so I turned down nearly everything. Nearly everything I turned down.
How was the experience? Has it confirmed or altered your view of the reality of what it must be to be a decision maker, to be a politician in this case?
I'm a hugest respect for people who actually do make decisions. I said, I'm glad it's not me. As I have said in interviews, it irritates me when anyone says we're following the science and everything, because that's complete. I hope they're not following the science, partly because the science isn't telling anyone what to do. So, you know, as I said, the science is more walking beside you, humming and hawing and saying, well, if you did this, this might happen. If we did this right, it might happen, which is their role, because the policy decisions have to be made so much broader than what something like SAGE can provide. It's got to take into account ethics and fairness and justice and the future, the economic circumstances. It's got to do a huge amount of balancing, much bigger than just the science. And so, as I said, that's why I always got infuriated at this phrase, following the science. I think that people have stopped using it now because they realise how absurd it is.
So this leads into another question I was going to ask, which is, and feel free to, you know, if you don't want to answer this, that's fine. But what's your experience been of the dynamic between, let's say, SAGE, the scientific community, and the government? Has it been?
Oh, I no idea. I'm genuinely ignorant. I mean, I'm down as being on SAGE, but I just went to one meeting. But I'm down on the website as being on SAGE. So no, I've got no idea at all how that interaction's gone. I've got the highest respect for people on SAGE and what they're doing, and the reports have been coming out look very good. So, but I've no idea how that policy. You know, all I've got is what what people like Chris Whitty and Patrick Vallance says, that they essentially, what I think their job is to summarize the evidence about various effectiveness of various interventions, and to make some judgment about what the effect of those might be. And that's fine. That's an input, and that's really valuable. But it's not telling anyone what to do.
It's interesting, I think, because politicians, to use an obvious phrase, are kind of in the business of slings and arrows. I mean, they're used to being assaulted on all sides by opinion and derision. Scientists not so.
Yeah, I think it's appalling, the sort of personal, nastiness that's been around, particularly aimed at Neil Ferguson and others in his team. So no wonder they keep their heads down. I don't blame them one bit. I don't like people being nasty to me. I haven't had that much, in fact, which is quite, but some, and I don't like it. Nobody likes that.
Is that what motivated you to reduce your profile over the summer, as you said?
Well, yeah. I couldn't. I get very stressed, and I think, what am I doing? I don't want to live through this. Do this. You get partly just the stress of people asking you. I mean, at one point, I was quite outspoken, which I have no regrets at all, on the Andrew Marr show, because I got so fed up at these daily briefings with numbers just being spouted out without any regard to their context or what they meant or anything. I called this number theatre, which is a good phrase, and it stuck, and went viral, in fact. So I had my rant. I had 1 minute rant against the briefings and how awful they were. And but I said that was my rant. I wasn't going to do it again. But then everyone starts asking, "Oh, come on our program," because they want you to rant against the government. I said, "No, I've done that once. I'm not going to do it again." So that's So I've been need to be very sparing for that kind of thing. Yeah. Otherwise, you just get a reputation as a ranter, and I'm not. The media are awful in a couple of ways. All they want to. Well, this is an exaggeration, but they have a massive concern for either blame or speculation. So they want to blame somebody all the time. Whose fault is it? Who's done something wrong? And they want to say, what do you think will happen in 6 months' time? And I think, what? I haven't got a clue. Blame or speculation is what they really want. Because these are the stories, the clickable stories, to blame or to speculate. And it just really annoys me. But I must say, on the other hand, I think a lot of journalists have really come up to the mark in terms of trying to understand the data, trying to report the data well. Not all of them, but a lot have. And I have been stitched up and deliberately misunderstood a few times. But on the whole, I've been reported very well and been treated very well by the media. And partly because they need you, they've got to be nice to you, otherwise I won't help. And I think they've made a really good attempt, not helped a lot of the time by the sort of communications coming out of Number 10. And that's, I get, the whole thing about, all I do is work on communication. When I spot communication that is manipulative and is not informing people, is not helping them understand what is actually going on, it really annoys me.
Absolutely. And I have to say, my my first introduction to you was 2, possibly 3 years ago, seeing a talk you gave about the relationship between science and the media, and you did it in a very typical style. It was really entertaining. It was fun. It was jaw dropping, and enjoyable because of it. I'm curious. The last 6 months, has that sort of exaggerated the disconnect between science and the media, or have you been impressed?
No, I think it's improved. No. Those stories, which are just a litany of disasters and awful headlines and things like that. No. I think it's actually got improved a lot. And I think that's because the media largely have made an effort to try to understand what's going on, instead of just going for the killer bacon sandwich sort of headline that I was making fun of. This is too important and too rapidly changing and too uncertain and too difficult to get away with those sorts of idiotic headlines. Well, they were right at the beginning. They started off up to 500,000 could die sort of headlines back in early March. In other words, taking a massively worst case scenario where we didn't do anything whatsoever and talking about it almost as if it was an expectation. Appalling headlines like that. And we've not had those sorts of, what you might call hysterical, ill-informed headlines. to the same degree, occasionally, but not that much at all. I think they've done a lot better.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing, isn't it? I mean, this is a completely different topic, and we could talk about it for hours. But anxiety and fear, unfortunately, seem to be the absolute key selling points. They seem the most effective. Otherwise, they wouldn't be used so much.
Of course.
Which is very difficult to stomach, isn't it?
It is. It's very difficult, and it's led, I think, the media but I don't just blame the media. I blame government as well for upping the fear factor deliberately. At the start of lockdown and to a certain extent now as well. This is serious, so we're going to draw this big graph showing doubling right up to the middle of October and 50,000 cases a day.
I mean, that was quite apparent, wasn't it, when lockdown restrictions were eased and many people were hesitant to take advantage of it.
Oh, it still are. There's a lot of people who haven't come outdoors yet, and they're going to be indoors all winter. And obviously they are anxious, but the personal anxiety, and the other thing that really upsets me is that there's not been a clear explanation of what the risks are to people if they get COVID. It's available. There's online calculators. I've been talking about it. Lots of people have been talking about it, but it has not been made clear, and there hasn't been a good source of public information about it. And I think this is deeply unfortunate. And I'm not sure what the anxiety is. If you tell young people that they're at very little, but it is clear people know that young people are at very little risk, certainly of hospitalization or dying. There's another business how many might have long-term symptoms. We've got to remember that. But the massive age gradient that older people have got 1,000, 10,000 times the risk of young people. The average age that people die of COVID is 84 for women, 81 for men, and so on. These sorts of facts, and the fact that the age is the overwhelmingly important factor, that seems to have got through finally. I've been banging on about, not just me, banging on about it for 6 months.
The difficulty there, isn't there, is that if you have an isolated and very tragic case of a young person or even a child dying with COVID in their system, then suddenly that's a front page.
I know, I got upset. I saw a tweet going around with lots of support reporting an 18, so a really sad story. An 18-year-old had died of COVID, and that is really sad. And although I'm pretty confident they will have had other health conditions, but I feel like saying, well, 250, 300 18-year-olds die every year in this country. They're all unbelievably sad, tragic things. What a terrible age to die. But what about these people? They don't get tweeted about.
No, indeed.
And so I think, again, I sound like I've got to be careful not to slide into the anti-skeptical wing, but I do feel that the privileging of COVID-caused harm can be a very negative thing. And I'm not alone. There's a recent letter being written by a huge host of general practitioners saying that the over-privileging of preventing every death from COVID is having massive knock-on effects in terms of other issues. Apart from the increase in fear, people still reluctant to go to hospital. Still 30% more people dying at home than normal. We don't know what sort of deaths those are. These are having really big knock-on effects. This privileging of COVID mortality and COVID harm above everything else. And I think, while it is a very nasty disease, and of course we don't want it to get out of control, I do feel that that's an important thing to keep in mind. And it's by saying things like that that I get identified with the more skeptical wing. But I don't feel particularly aligned with them.
Well, statistics isn't skeptical or not, is it? It's just fact.
No, I know it's really difficult to say. You could say, well, the latest running figures looks like about 50 people a day maybe dying of COVID in the country, which is a lot, and it's double what it was maybe 2 weeks ago. But you could say, well, 1,500 other people died yesterday of something else, and it's just really good to try to keep that in mind.
Yeah, exactly. It's about balance, isn't it? As I think you've highlighted in lots of your talks and lots of your work over the past decades. But so since 2007, you've been dedicated to maths communication, or stats communication, and risk. Now that you're retired and you've come back and you've done, as you said, what you consider to be your duty over this period, do you think there's a gap for some body or some organisation doing what you have been doing in an official capacity?
It's very difficult to be official. I mean, there are organisations. I just feel I'm just part of an ecology of people who want to tell it how it is. And I could mention fact-checking organisations such as Full Fact. I could mention the Ask for Evidence campaign of Sense About Science. I could mention the Science Media Centre, who've done a fantastic job. I've worked with them. They've been so brilliant at putting scientists in touch with media and the public. All these are charities surviving on donations, essentially, all of whom are part of a group, all trying to improve the discourse. That's all. They haven't got sides. They're not one side or another. They're not aligned. They're just trying to improve the discourse. And I think that these independent organizations, of which I feel proud to be linked to in some way, have done a brilliant job. And we need more like that. But I don't want them official. I don't think official, because if it's official, in the end, it'll come under the Cabinet Office. So I'm not going to blame them. They've got a job. But the last thing you want is that. The other body, of course, and I've got to admit, a huge conflict of interest here, is the Office for National Statistics. And the whole point about them, and I think it should be really clearly known and recognised, that they do not answer to the government. They answer to Parliament. It was written into the Statistics Act of 2007 that they are not answerable to either the Cabinet Office or the Treasury or government department. They answer to Parliament. And that gives them an independence, which is, enormously important. And they, my conflict of interest is that halfway through the epidemic, I was chosen to go on as a non-executive director for the UK Stats Authority. So now I'm part of the oversight group over the whole national statistics in this country and the statistical profession. So, which I'm really proud to be. But I wouldn't have done it, I don't think, unless I felt confident that this was an independent statistics body.
And I've asked you about some serious things over the past 6 months, and thank you very much for such interesting and frank answers. That's been really fascinating. I guess I wanted to talk about the book that you released last year, partly, and then I'd also just like to ask you about your life now, because you said you're retired, but you seem like a very busy retiree. So let's talk about the art of statistics before I let you get on to the rest of your day. Tell me about the book, which came out in 2019.
Oh, can I be a little bit? I mean, maybe I'm boastful all the time anyway, but I'm really proud of it. It took me 4 years to write the damn thing. I really, really worked hard to write actually what's a disguised first course in statistics that goes through the whole business, right up to hypothesis tests and Bayesian analysis and p-values and significance and all that stuff, regression, all those things in there without any maths in it. And emphasizing the ideas and the concepts and the difficulties and the importance of looking at data and understanding what the problem is, and just trying to get as far as possible from the traditional statistics courses, which I have taught all my life and enjoy teaching, which are, maths based. Here's a set of techniques. This is how you do them. Here's the formulas and this sort of stuff. And that's how I've taught it. And it was a real challenge and a pleasure to try to write something which I sort of tried to put together what I feel I've learned, and it meant I could use lots of personal examples. It took me ages to get the structure. I was moving chapters around, changing the order, and I was hugely influenced by the development of stats education in New Zealand and elsewhere, but New Zealand in particular, world leaders in stats education, who in their courses have moved probability theory and the whole normal mathematical basis for statistical modeling right to the end. So I don't bring in probability till chapter 8. And I was amazed and surprised and impressed how much of statistics you can do without any probability theory, apart from picking something at random. That's all you, and a 4-year-old child can understand that, picking something at random. So that's all you need to do vast amounts of get huge amounts of statistical ideas out there. You just need the probability theory when you start wanting to work out in some sort of mathematical form what the sample distribution of a statistic is, et cetera, central limit theorem, all those things. So it was amazing to find how late you could leave that, and I was very impressed. I was very surprised, in fact. And anyway, so it's done very well. the book.
And
Tried to make it readable.
Who's the book for?
Interesting. I was going to call it Statistics for Data Science. It's a book for, I felt, for a lot of it for people transitioning into data science, who needed to know. I feel very strongly that data science is a vital subject, and that the statistical component of it is absolutely essential. I think everyone now finally has shed themselves of this delusion that somehow, if you've got enough data, it speaks for itself. This kind of nonsense. As I say, if you've got the more data you've got, the more care you have to take in its interpretation, and basic statistical ideas are absolutely vital for this. So that's my sort of manifesto: is hang on, don't just forget, we little statisticians, we've been doing this stuff for centuries, and we know a little bit. We do know a bit. Thank you very much. And it's gone very well in that. It is being used in some courses and so on for data science education, or it could be used for people coming up through mathematics and statistics who want to get a conceptual view before they do proper courses with computing and the maths, which is absolutely vital for some people. It wasn't really supposed to be a totally just popular book. But a lot of people have read it, I think, just as a popular book, but that's not really what it was. It was much more, it's in this Pelican series, which I grew up with, these blueback pelicans, which are sort of autodidact books that kind of teach yourself books, but they're not called teach yourself. But they were definitely an educational process, not just, here's a set of stories about statistics.
Okay. The art of statistics, and I'm sure I'll include a link in the show notes.
Good, yeah. Well, it's sold very well. I mean, I must say, nothing like a good pandemic to sell stats books. I mean, terrible thing to say, but it's true. Yeah.
Great. Well, I'll finish off, David, by asking you to tell me a little bit about your retirement. Outside of everything we've been discussing, what's been filling your time, if indeed there has been a spare minute?
No, I've been working too hard, and I mean, I don't want anyone to have any sympathy for me whatsoever, because it's all my own choice, and I've been enormously privileged in living in a nice place, with easy to get out to it for exercise. Got a dog to go run with. I've been fitter than I've been for ages. And just me and my partner, and so we live a very nice existence. So in terms of how it's been for us, I just feel enormously lucky and privileged. But I have been busy, and it has been a bit stressful. But it's kind of, I'm sure I could have done things better. You always think, I could have, I don't know what, but it could have had a better influence. I've been banging on about some stuff, and no one's taking any notice, and so I don't think I've done things brilliantly, but it's been quite good to have something to do, to be honest.
Is there any unexpected hobby which you're looking to enjoy when you move away from maths or statistics?
I've done a bit of my hobby is main hobby is walking and stained glass panels, and so I've been doing a bit of that, and I want to get back into I have been in my shed a fair amount. I love being in my shed. I just put me in my shed and I'm happy, and I've had days walking on my own in the middle of Dartmoor, which is possibly my favorite ever activity. But not enough of that. So, not enough really is traveling. I love traveling, and I feel pinned down, and not being able to think of long. We usually go to India for 6 or 8 weeks every year.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. No, it's been since retirement, and before we was taking long trips to India. So,
and what draws you to India?
I love it. I absolutely love it. I'm not quite sure. I just find it absolutely fascinating. We're treated with such kindness and respect, undeserved given history, and I find it an absolutely riveting country, and I feel terribly sad at what it's going through at the moment.
Yeah, well, I one of the many reasons I long for the end of the pandemic, and I hope that travel returns in some form soon. I look forward to seeing some of your stained glass as well, if it's ever available, or if you're going to share it online.
It's quite mathematical, quite a lot of it. So sometime I'm going to start giving talks about it.
Fabulous, great. Well, thank you very much, David. It's been really enjoyable. and especially how busy you are. So thank you for
No,
your
no.
time.
Thanks for the opportunity to witter on about myself. Absurd privilege.
Well, it's a delight to listen to. So thanks again, and hopefully I'll catch up with you again soon.
Okay, great. Bye.
Bye.